Hello and welcome to this NVQ induction. My name is Matthew Joyce and I've been allocated as your NVQ assessor for this Level 5 Health and Safety course. Today I'm going to talk you through how the NVQ works, I'm going to talk you through how our online e-portfolio system works, and I'm going to talk about how you can plan out going about this course. By now you should have received an email containing a link to the e-portfolio along with your username and password. Today I'm going to use an example portfolio. However, everything you'll see here today is going to be exactly replicated in your real life portfolio of your own. So to get us started straight into this NVQ, as you can see I've already inputted the username and password. I'm going to press enter to log into the site. Some of you might be familiar with NVQs before, some of you this might be new. What this induction video is designed to do is to take you right the way through from the basics right the way through to the point where you can start putting your evidence into the system. As soon as you log into this e-portfolio, you're greeted with what we call the home screen. Along the top you'll see this cream coloured bar. This is the navigation bar and it will take you to all of the key sections of the e-portfolio site. We're going to go through each one of those in just a few minutes time. To start with, I'm going to talk to you about the home page. So on this home page you can see a number of things that jump out at you straight away. Over here on the right hand side you've got this information panel. You've got news appearing here. There's also an option to click for any events, and also you've got the opportunity to click on resources. In resources you're going to see the candidate guides, which you should already have emailed to you, and hopefully you've already had a chance to read, but if you want to access them at any point they are there along with the equality policy. If we go into the main screen now, you can see you've got three tabs: Overview, Tasks and Profile. You can have a navigate around this and get familiar with it. The one thing I'm going to point out is on the Profile tab, you can see you've got an option down here to change your password. And I do recommend you take just a minute or two to change it from the default password to something that's a little more secure. What I'm now going to show you is the main navigation of the e-portfolio system. So before we start to look at how the NVQ works, we're going to look at the system first of all. So back up to our bar along the top. We've got the home page which we just explored. The course folder, we're going to look at this in a bit more detail shortly, so we are going to come back to this. All I'm going to say at this stage is the course folder contains all of the specific criteria to complete the course, and then it's where the evidence that you have is matched up against that criteria. But I'm going to come back to that very soon. The next option along is the contact diary. The contact diary basically contains all of the formal communication between you and myself as the assessor for the NVQ. So it will record things like when you delete evidence, as you can see. It will record when you submit evidence to me. It will record the feedback that I give you as a result of that evidence. In effect, it's a journal of all of the key activities. The next option along the top is the evidence folder. This is where all of your evidence is going to be inputted and stored. We are going to come back to this again very soon, so I'm not going to dwell on it at this stage. Next option is news and events. This was also visible on the home page if you remember, so we're going to post here any news that's relevant to you and any events that might be relevant as well. Some of the key news that we do post is things like holidays, so we'll always make sure you know who the point of contact is if I'm ever away. We'll also post on there information such as office closures, for example during the Christmas or Easter periods. The next option along the top, as you'll see, is the forums. Now this is a forum, it's open to all candidates and all assessors. Now this is an opportunity for you to post any questions or comments that again will be read by all of the candidates and all of the assessors. If I just click onto the forum, so we enter it, the Level 5 forum, you'll see that there's already some discussions taking place in terms of the guidance for each particular unit. So you can see there you've got guidance for all of the units, and then at the top there's also a topic on induction questions and answers. So if after this induction video you have some questions or some areas that you want to discuss in further detail, you can always post your question in there and one of the team or myself will get around to answering it as soon as we can. If we go back up to the navigation bar, you can also see the next option is evaluation form. Now at the end of the program, we're going to ask you to complete a short evaluation just to tell us how you think the program went and whether we can improve on the NVQ program in any way. Next option, registration form. This again is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to contain all of the registration information for you individually. It should already be pre-filled in with your name and address. Please do take a few minutes though just to check that information, as this is the name that will appear on your certificate and this is also the address that your certificate will go to. So it's worth just a few minutes to make sure that is absolutely correct. If you scroll further down on this page, there's also the opportunity to put in your employer's name and address, so please do fill that information in for us. If I scroll back up to the top, the next option is marked messages. This is an internal email system within the ePortfolio. Now in terms of contact with me, you can contact me by normal email, you can contact me by mobile phone, or you can use this internal messaging system. It's relatively straightforward to use, and as you can see you've got an inbox, new messages, sent items, archives and drafts. And you simply click on the tab to go into that relevant page. If I click on new messages, for example, you'll see that you're set up to message very quickly and very easily. It's simply a case of typing in your subject here, and then you can type in your message down here. On the right hand side, you'll see the people that you can message. I'm there, of course, as your assessor, so you can contact me about any advice or any assessment. Next to that, you can email the internal verifier. That's a gentleman called Chris Pike. The role of the verifier is to basically perform quality assurance on the work that I'm doing. So Chris will sample about 30% of your portfolio. So you'll notice every now and again when you go in, some of your evidence will be marked as verified. That means Chris has gone in and done that verification on it. Chris has another role as well, which is to deal with any complaints or any appeals against the decisions that I make. So if you wish to complain or if you wish to appeal against one of my assessment decisions, then you can simply send a message through to Chris and he'll guide you through that process. Going back up to our navigation bar, you can see the next option is log out, so you can securely log out of the system. And over here on the right hand side, you've got a help portal that will basically give you access to online help resources should you wish to access that. What we're going to do now is talk about the NVQ. We've covered the system and broadly how it operates and how you navigate. What we need to do now is talk about the NVQ and how that works. To do that, I've just clicked on the course folder. Now I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of NVQ jargon right now. Your NVQ, if I just scroll down the screen a little bit, is broken down into what we call units, and those units are numbered. So you can see here you've got 501, 502, 503, and if we scroll down further you'll see you've got 504 right the way down to 508, when the numbering changes slightly to become 401 and then 601. All of these units are mandatory, so we have to work through all of them. Right at the start you'll see you've got the induction unit, which is where we ask you to complete things such as your CV, job description, an organisation chart and a brief overview of the organisation that you work for. These units, if we take 501 as an example, these units are broken down into elements. So if we look at 501 you can see that is broken down into three elements, 501.1, 501.2 and 501.3. Again, all of those elements are mandatory, so we have to work through all of them. If we just look at some of the other units, you'll see that they may have perhaps a little bit more. 502 again has 3 elements, 503 as an example has 4 elements, so some might be a little bit larger than the norm. These elements are then broken down into what we call criteria, and it's those criteria that you need to focus on. The way that the NVQ works is it's built up of lots of criteria. To complete the NVQ, you have to get evidence from your job that you meet those criteria. Now that evidence is basically the things that you have done and that you have contributed to. This NVQ is all about you, So it has to be you and your work. That's the first thing they want to stress. So it's not about what your company does or what your organisation does. It is about what you do in your specific role. So what we do is we look at these criteria, we then match up evidence from your job role, and we take that evidence and match it up against the criteria. And that is how the NVQ works. Some of this evidence you may already have, perhaps because you've been doing this for a number of years or because you're a very experienced practitioner. However, if you're perhaps newer to the industry, some of this evidence you may be generating right now as part of your day-to-day jobs. Everyone completing the NVQ is at a different stage of development, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. The NVQ is all about learning and putting into practice in the real world that learning. Now what I'm going to do is show you these criteria, and to do that, towards the top of the screen there's an option that says View, and you'll see three little pictures, a folder, a graph and a clipboard. The graph is marked as gap analysis, so I'm going to click on that. This is going to show us all of the criteria that is outstanding that we have to complete still. And for this demonstration I'm going to pick on one unit only, which is Unit 501. So I'm going to scroll down just so 501 fills the screen. So here you can see Unit 501 broken down into the three elements, 501.1, 501.2 and 501.3. And then next to that you can now see the criteria has appeared. So looking at the first element, 501.1. The first criteria, number 1, provides sufficient and clear information to people in the organisation about the benefits of a positive health and safety culture. So what we need to do is get evidence from your job role that you do that. Now, off the top of my head, I could suggest the evidence for that might include induction courses that you've run. It might include safety toolbox talks. It might include training courses. It might include safety committees or meetings with management or clients. It could include looking after notice boards or newsletters or perhaps writing articles for websites. The type of evidence that you're going to produce for this NVQ is unique to you and your role. There is no set specific evidence requirements. It is about how you apply these standards in your role. If we look at the next criteria, obtain the support of those in the organisation who can promote a positive culture, tailoring the approach to meet the needs of directors, managers and employee representatives. Again, examples of that could include safety committees. So it could be minutes of a safety committee where you have proposed a new system of work or a new piece of equipment or a new method of work perhaps. What you'll have noticed straight away perhaps is that I said evidence for 1.1 could be a safety committee minutes, evidence for 1.2 could be safety committee minutes. It will be good practice to use the same piece of evidence for more than one criteria. And again, that piece of evidence could fit into several elements or several units. As a rule of thumb, and this is just a guide, you are looking for about 10 pieces of evidence for each unit. So with 10 units, that's about 100 pieces of evidence across the portfolio. That is a guide. Some candidates will do more, some will do less. That's not a problem, but it's a bit of a guideline for you. The key thing I want to stress right from the start is that with your NVQ evidence, it has to be your own work and it has to be high quality. So if you were going to submit to me, for example, a toolbox talk for this first element, then I would pick your best toolbox talk. There is no point sending me 10 or 20 toolbox talks. It is best just to send me the best one that you have. The NVQ is all about quality, not quantity. What you also have to think about with the NVQ is that you need to prove that you contributed to that. So with a toolbox talk as one example, yes, it will be good to submit, say, the presentation or the briefing notes that you completed for that toolbox talk. But to back up that piece of evidence, you could also submit the sign-in sheet that would show that you delivered the training and the list of people who received it. If you were going to submit an induction course that you delivered, then again you could submit the presentation or video or workbook that you used, but it would also be good practice to submit the attendance sheet, which again shows that you delivered the course and who attended it. Perhaps you might use evaluation forms. Again, you could submit a sample of those evaluation forms for the induction course. Perhaps you do an assessment on your induction course to confirm your own learners' understanding of what you're telling them. It will be good practice again to submit the assessment sheet from some of those learners. So just from one piece of evidence induction, you can actually be submitting 4 pieces of evidence, such as the sign-in sheet, the program, the evaluation form, and the assessment form. And that's how you can build a comprehensive portfolio of evidence. Just remember that key thing though, the evidence has to be your own. This is all about you, and so every piece of evidence you submit must be your own work. Or, if you've contributed to other people's work, you must make it clear what your contribution has been. So if we look at element 501.1, you'll see there's a whole list of criteria there. We need to meet all those criteria. 501.2, again, there are 4 criteria there. We would need to meet those. And again, the same pieces of evidence may tick off more than one criteria. If we look at 501.3 in a little bit more detail, this is where things change slightly. You'll notice that if you look at the words used in that criteria, it suddenly changes to things like describe and identify and explain. The reason for that is the last element in every unit is all about knowledge, whereas the first 2 or 3 elements is about your practical skills. The last element is always about knowledge. So essentially what you're going to do here is write a short report showing that you have the knowledge of those things that are listed there. It's called a reflective account, and the best way that I suggest that you tackle this is by using something like Microsoft Word as a straightforward sort of document writing program, and using each of these headings, or each of these criteria I should say, as a subheading on your report. So I've just highlighted the first criteria, describe the nature and role of a positive health and safety culture. What you could do is use that as a subheading in your report and then write a paragraph or 2 paragraphs about what a health and safety culture is. You could maybe reference in HSE guidance or IOSH guidance, or perhaps legislation if that's applicable. Your reflective account for this element, the guidance says about 1,000 to 1,500 words, which is about 2 to 3 sides of A4 paper. There's no set format for this, and there's no right or wrong answer. This reflective account is simply about showing that you have the knowledge of what these criteria is looking for. So write it in your own format, write it in your own style, but do it in such a way that you cover off all of those points. Just remember what I said though, if you're going to quote from other people's work, you need to identify that as the source to avoid plagiarism. So that is how the NVQ works. So you take your unit, you look at the criteria, you identify your product evidence, that's the things that you have produced yourself, and you upload that into the system. You then write your reflective account for the knowledge bits, and you upload that into the system. And the way that I suggest you work through the NVQ is do it unit by unit. So Unit 501 is all about promoting good culture. If we scroll down to the next unit as another example, Unit 502, you'll see that this is all about developing and maintaining competency. So this is about training needs and meeting those training needs. So again, the first 2 elements, the criteria, is all about what you can do, such as undertaking training needs analysis, and then designing, delivering training, such as inductions, toolbox talks or training programs to meet those needs. And then again, if you look at the last element, 502.3, you'll see that this is about the knowledge of training, so explaining how you can build and identify competency. So that's how it's going to work with your NVQ. What I'm going to do now is show you how you can upload evidence into this system and match it up against those criteria. To do that, I'm going to go back up to the evidence folder. So by simply clicking on the evidence folder, it's going to take me into that particular part of the portfolio. As you can see, there's nothing here at the moment. There's no data in this table. If I click on the right hand side here, there's an option for Create Evidence. As soon as I click on that, a pop-up window is going to appear, which is going to allow me to put the evidence into the system. I've firstly got this option as to whether I'm going to upload a file or create new evidence. In 99% of cases, you're going to upload a piece of evidence because you will already have this evidence from your day-to-day job. So I'm going to select the Upload a File option. And as you can see, there are 4 tabs that's now appeared: Upload, Type, Detail, and Cross-Reference. These are the 4 stages we need to work through to complete the evidence referencing process. The first thing is to select the evidence itself. So I'm going to click on Browse. As soon as I do that, it opens up the normal document selection window. So on my desktop, I have a file that I'm going to use called Induction Course 2012. So I'm going to click on Open, and you'll see that this has now brought the document across here. If I click on Upload, you'll see that that document is now uploaded and it is now in the system. So we've now completed the first out of 4 stages. The next stage, the second stage, is to give that document a type. Now the list that you see here is the standard list of NVQ evidence types. For this particular qualification, we're only going to use a handful of these. The most common one that you're going to use is about halfway down, and it's the one that says product. I've just ticked to put a tick in that box there. Product is anything you've produced yourself. So any evidence that you have produced yourself is going to be product evidence. The only other types of evidence you might use is going to be reflective account. And if you remember, we said that that is going to be your short statement that you're going to complete for each unit. So you use that once for each unit. You could also use a witness testimony. A witness testimony can be very useful if you've done a piece of work or given some advice, but you don't have any particular evidence to back that up. The best way to treat a witness testimony is exactly like a reference. Ask your witness to write it on letter-headed paper. They should sign and date it, and they should be specific about what they are confirming that you have done. So the specific advice you've given or the specific activities you've undertaken. If you want more guidance on a witness testimony, then just speak to me and we can talk about it in a bit more detail. So for this piece of evidence, I've ticked a product. I'm now going to click on Details. You'll see the name of the file has already been brought across. I'm going to leave it at that, but I could change it if I want to. And now I have the opportunity to write a short description. So for this induction course, I'm going to write that I wrote this course for line managers to use in their teams. So a short description telling me about that evidence is absolutely fine. Next, and the final part, is to click on cross-reference. As soon as I click on cross-reference, you'll see that the list of units now appears, Unit 501 right the way down. For this demonstration, I'm only going to use 501 because that's the unit that we looked at earlier on. So if I click on 501, you'll see that it now gives me a drop-down list of the 3 elements. And again, we looked at these earlier. For this demonstration, I'm only going to focus on 501.1. So as soon as I click on that, I get an option here to choose the criteria that we were looking at earlier on. And if you remember, the very first criteria we looked at was provide sufficient and clear information to people about the benefits of a positive culture. And then the other criteria are there. At this point, you make a decision as to where you feel your piece of evidence matches the criteria. So in my induction course that we're now uploading into the system, do I feel that it meets this criteria? Well, I would say yes, it does. It's an induction course. We've spoken about what people need to do in the organisation, their health and safety responsibilities, and how we manage health and safety. So I feel that yes, it does meet that criteria. So I'm going to put a tick in it. The next criteria was obtain the support of those in the organisation who can promote a positive culture, tailoring the approach to meet the needs of different people. Well, I would say that on an induction course, you're absolutely obtaining the support of people, and you are tailoring it, because you would tailor your induction to employee or manager or senior manager, as the case would be. So I'm going to put a tick in that particular criteria. The next one is use opportunity to communicate information about a positive culture. Well, I would say that an induction course is absolutely an opportunity to do that. So I'm going to put a tick in there. The next option is 1.4. Now, I don't believe this evidence was creating a new opportunity, because ultimately the induction was an ongoing process. So I don't believe that this evidence meets that criteria. Likewise, I don't believe the induction sufficiently shows that I have investigated ways to overcome barriers to change. So I feel that this piece of evidence meets these criteria. Given that I'm happy with that referencing, I can now press save. It then takes me back to the list of units that we were looking at earlier on. Now remember what I said earlier, you can reference the same piece of evidence to more than one unit. So if I felt this piece of evidence would fit into other units, then I can add that now. For the purpose of the demonstration, I don't believe that's necessary, but it is something to bear in mind. Given that I'm now happy with this, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and press save. And you'll see here that it will say the change is saved successfully. Do I want to close the window or continue? I'm going to hit the close window button, and it's now going to take me back to the evidence folder, and you'll see that that piece of evidence has now been uploaded. I can click on that title there to open the evidence if I wish, and over here I can see when it was uploaded. I can see that it's a P for product evidence, and over here on the far right I can see that I've got a red cross which allows me to delete that evidence if I feel that I no longer want it. Or I've got this other option, which is an E with a star picture whizzing around it. That will open up the evidence wizard, which is the screen that we were just looking at. So if I ever wanted in the future to go back into this piece of evidence and reuse it in other areas of the NVQ, then I simply click on that item and I can go back and do that. Or if I wanted to change the name or description, again I can do that from there. And so there, as an example, we have put evidence into the NVQ and we have referenced it. I'm going to go back to the course folder now to show you how that's working. So if I click on course folder, you'll see element 501.1 has appeared as started. That's because we have now started work on that particular element and we've started to reference evidence. This time I'm going to take you to a slightly different view. If I actually click on the element itself, it takes me into a screen called the element information, and there are three things that I'm going to point out to you here. The first thing I'm going to point out is down here, this grid at the bottom of the screen. You'll see that we've got the piece of evidence that we've uploaded, that it's a P for product, and over here you'll see this grid that says assessment criteria. You'll probably notice that we've got numbers there, 1.1, 1.2 down to 1.5. Those are of course the specific criteria for that element. And if I hover my mouse over one, you'll see that it brings a little pop-up window telling what that criteria is. So by now you're probably already familiar that that first criteria was provide sufficiently clear information about the benefits of a positive culture. If I go to the next one, again you can see that all of that criteria is shown for me. And you'll notice that I tick those first three criteria. That's been reflected here in this grid. Because all of the criteria is mandatory, to complete this element we must make sure there is at least one tick in every column. What I can now focus on, because I know I've got evidence for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, I can focus on getting evidence for the outstanding bits, which is 1.4 and 1.5. As soon as I feel that every piece of criteria has been covered by at least one piece of evidence, that's the point that you can send this element to me for assessment. And the way to do that is towards the top right here. You can see this option that says submit your competence claim. When you feel this element is ready, you submit it to me by clicking on that button. I will then undertake an assessment of this element, and I will either accept it by saying yes, you have demonstrated your competency, or I will say no, we need to do further work on it. And if that's the case, I will always tell you what further work we need. It might be that we need to put further evidence in, it might be that we need to just explain something in a little bit more detail. Whatever it is, I'll be quite specific about what we need to do to complete it. Now, even though the minimum requirement is one tick in every column, I always recommend candidates to make sure that they have at least two pieces of evidence covering off every criteria. So at least two ticks in every column. That's guidance, it's not mandatory. because the minimum is 1, but I always think it's best to be safe and have an extra piece in there just in case. The final thing I'm going to show you on this element information screen is this here that says NVQ Assessment Plan, which is this document over here on the left. Again, this is a document that contains formal guidance on the types of evidence that you might find useful for the units. So again, if you're struggling to access a particular piece of evidence, or you're not sure what you might want to put in there, or you're not sure what to cover in the reflective account, you will find guidance in that document. It's a PDF document, so you can just click and open it. And in a nutshell, that is how the NVQ is going to work. If I just go back to the course folder, just for one last time, just a reminder, we've got those units, 501, going down, 10 of those in total. That's broken down into elements, 501.1, 0.2, 0.3 as an example, and those elements are broken down into criteria. You're going to select product evidence to show that you meet those criteria, and for the last element in the units, you're going to write your reflective account that shows you have the theory knowledge of what it's asking for. I suggest you tackle the NVQ unit by unit. So you start with one unit, complete all the elements in there, submit that to me as a unit, and then you simply repeat that process going through unit by unit. You don't have to do them in order, you can do them in any order you wish. My guidance to you will be to start with 501 because that is a good easy unit, it's all about culture, so I think that's a good one to start with. In terms of further help and guidance, if you want to contact me, then you can do so through the messages system here in the ePortfolio, or you can contact me by email, or you can contact me by mobile telephone. And I will email you very shortly to give you those contact details. If you have any questions at any time, please do contact me. Don't forget as well, you can always post something in the forums if you'd like to perhaps get a wider answer to your question. Before I round off, there's just a couple of other points I wish to mention, some frequently asked questions. Often I get asked what type of evidence the system might take, or what types of formats it can accept. The system is designed to take any format. The question is whether we can read it at our end. So what I ask is that you do keep your evidence to commonly used applications such as Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Adobe PDF documents, and similar things like that. If you can convert them to PDF, that's fantastic because that's a much easier format, but we can pretty much take most commonly used formats. If there is a problem, I will get back to you and discuss that with you. Another frequently asked question is about security. The only people who are going to see your information is you, me as your assessor, Chris Pike as the internal verifier, and possibly the external verifier from City and Guilds, who basically performs quality monitoring visits on us as a centre approved by City and Guilds. So those are the only people who are going to look at your evidence. So you can feel free to put up evidence in here in the knowledge that there's a limited number of people looking at it. It will only be used for the purpose of your NVQ. Once the NVQ is completed, this remains live for a period of 3 years after you complete, which is a requirement by the regulators and the government bodies. Once that's done, the site will be closed, the ePortfolio will be closed. You do have an option to download your ePortfolio to a CD or to a hard drive once you've completed it, if you wanted to keep it for posterity. The site is secure. As you can see at the top, it's a HTTPS site, so it is a secure site, but do remember I suggest you change your password to something a little more secure. That brings us to the end of this NVQ induction. So before I sign off, I just want to wish you well in the program. If you have any questions, please do contact me. As I say, internal email through the system, standard email or mobile phone, or use of the forums is absolutely okay. I'll get back to you as soon as I can do. If you have any questions, please do ask. Don't feel you're alone. It's difficult to get motivated on NVQ, so I would suggest that you take a few moments to come up with an action plan. Set yourselves realistic targets as to how you will complete each unit and what kind of timescale you'll complete it by. But if you do encounter any problems, do contact me at the earliest opportunity. I hope you found this NVQ induction video useful. It's been my pleasure presenting it to you, and I look forward to seeing some of your evidence coming up in the next few weeks.